Well, it's Mazzy here. Since we all have to be self-quarantined here in Seattle, actually, I shouldn't joke about that. It's not a funny situation what's happening around, and it's affecting a lot of people's health, a lot of people's industry, business. But since we're home here, it's time to catch up on all the contests. So this is my H2Vinyl Brad's 350 subscriber contest, and I am going to do it the best I can. The best Mazzy can. I don't know if you can hear music in the background. This has nothing to do with the contest, but I'm Prokofiev, and this is actually the Lieutenant Kiev Suite, Opus 60. A little obtuse. No, it's not obtuse at all. It's kind of a running joke if you don't know what that is. I'm rambling here. Anyway, we got 3 questions, and I'll probably do a little insertion if I can. Boy, that's what she said. I'll do a little insertion of needle drops to give you an idea if I can. So the first question, the first one is 3 albums that feature narration with music and everything. So the first one is an artist that I love and who died the last few years is Ken Nordine. Ken Nordine created an oral sensation of music and audio and commercials and voiceover stuff that he coined word jazz. Short stories, very conceptual, almost Twilight Zone-like, beat poet-like, started in the late 50s. This is a comp that he did. Ken Nordine, you've heard his voice on a lot of Levi commercials back in the 70s and 80s. He had a series of word jazz albums are pretty amazing. This is an album he did called Colors, which was based on a series of commercials I think he did for as a Benjamin Moore or one of the paint companies, where he would pick a color like amber, crimson, blue, gold, black, etc., burgundy, and just with music and do some voiceover speaking, and he has amazing voice. So this is great. This is actually a stamped promo copy. This is on the Philips label. He also did an album, I don't have it here right now, it's in a compact disc, but it's a great accessible point for a lot of you people, say, into David Grisman and the Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia. So Jerry Garcia, David Grisman, several others did some kind of acoustic-based music with Ken Nordine doing the voiceover. So that would be another great one. Don't think that's ever come out on vinyl, but it's an amazing compact disc. Next, I'm gonna do great album, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts by Brian Eno and David Byrne. They worked on this while they're in like a sort of but I don't say vacation, a working vacation in San Francisco. Most of this was put together there, a lot of it. And there's several cuts with radio talk show host fused in with African music, percussive music, electronics, a little mashup, a little psychedelic, but not really in that vein. Ambient, like Eno would be. Also a great piece with a live or a tape of an actual exorcism. So there's a couple of directions you can go with voice work on this one with Overcast. Now this is a Non-Such Records. This came out later on vinyl. This came out in several years ago. And like an expanded CD, added some outtakes and alternate and extra tracks. But the original is an amazing, it's such a gorgeous cover. So David Byrne, Brian Eno, you know them both. David Byrne from the Talking Heads, the ambient great artist Brian Eno, who some of us know started with Roxy Music on their first couple albums. And then lastly on this section, I'm talking this album, 1967 Zodiac Cosmic Sounds. Elektra Records put this out to kind of get into that whole electronic thing that was kind of starting out with Moog synthesizer and everything that was happening. And my music teacher in junior high school would play records. I had a music teacher and an English teacher. English teacher in high school, freshman year, and music teacher in 7th and 8th grade that would turn out the lights in our big music room. It was a round room that the orchestra and band played in, and she would play a record. She played 2 records in particular, and both I bought. One was she played the first Velvet Underground album with the song Heroin. Can you imagine a high school now teacher playing Heroin? This is in San Francisco, so maybe it wasn't as controversial, but to 14-year-olds, pretty wild. But I bought that first VU album, and then this Cosmic Sound. It's narrated by is it Montgarret, I believe, was the let's see, Montgarson. Oh, conducted. Words by Jacques Wilson, but I believe Garson did the words, and it's kind of electronic music, very poppy. People like Paul Beaver and Bernie Krause, I believe, are on here. A lot of studio musicians, Moog synthesizer stuff, and he narrates basically 12 tracks for each sign of the Zodiac. I love this stuff. It's kind of considered campy now. 2 years ago, I believe, there was a record store day, a glow-in-the-dark version, which I have. I think that might have been mono, but you got to have this album in stereo. This is my original copy, and to me, it's a favorite album. It actually says, must be played in the dark, Elektra Records. And just this is a personal favorite of mine. It's interesting how this is a mono jacket, and I remember my first Doors album was the same way. They placed the stereo, because this is that transition period where everybody started wanting stereo a little more, the 67, 68 period where mono, we didn't give a shit about mono. We wanted stereo at that point, the new sound of stereo. Now people are like, creaming in their jeans for mono records. So let me stop it here and try to do a little fusion of some of these to give you a little listening taste of it.
Mr. Slick, smooth as snake, sliding on a bellyache, slipping through some awful stuff, never ever having quite enough. You think he'd tire, just plain get bored. You know that matadors, too often gored, see the bull for what it is, catch on quick, but that's the viz. But Slick, he never tires.
5 o'clock doesn't end the workday. Virgo's nimble watchmaker mind ticks on. Four, 7, 8.5 is the wavelength of blue. Corundum is the reason for sapphire. Virgo, earth-bound builder of planes, land-locked draftsman of ships.
Are you sold? Did I sell you on those? This is actually fun. Thanks, Brad, for doing this. Brad, I've only followed him a little while. He entered my whack-a-mole contest, and he's got a really nice, calming presentation. So I'll put a link down there, and if you don't follow Brad, please do, because it seems like a mild-mannered reporter, as they would say with Superman of the Daily Planet, Clark Kent. That makes no sense in context to this. So next one is 5 albums or artists, 5 artists that you have never shown on the VC, vinyl community, or rarely shown. I don't think I've shown these particular records. I have a couple artists. These two 80s, sort of the resurgence of Marianne Faithfull, and these are great records. This is when Marianne Faithfull, after being the kind of beautiful little ingenue from 1966 with As Tears Go By, girlfriend of Mick Jagger, protege of the Rolling Stones, and co-author of Sister Morphine, the Stones, that finally got a credit later. Put out these albums, I believe, in 81, 82-ish. This one's 81, I believe. And they're killer. She came back with this throaty, cigarette-infested vocal range that was low and dirty and wonderful, with some rhythmic, percussive 80s, disco, not disco, but club scene sound. And her version of Working Class Hero, the John Lennon song on this, is amazing. This is a promo copy that I got back when it was released. She does, oh God, it's just great. Anyway, really kind of, the club scene started playing this stuff, and it's very 80s excess, but in the best possible way. It doesn't have all those tinkling piano flourishes that I hate about the 80s records now. So I'm going to show this one and this one almost as a companion. Love this photograph, love that cover. But these both got a lot of airplay, at least in the Bay Area, but I think everywhere. These were pretty well-received records, and it really kind of reinvented Marianne Faithfull, who would later go on to make some great records of Kurt Weill, Three-Penny Opera stuff, very smoky, jazzy, almost French cabaret type records. And I have all her records after this on compact disc, but these records on vinyl are pretty wonderful. Next, a record, some of you know Rickie Lee Jones from Chucky's in Love in the 70s. That was a huge hit. This is an amazing record. If you have a great stereo rig, even if you don't, this version, Analog Productions, of this record, I think this might be 45 RPM, but this is a record she did of covers, and I tell you, it's one of the best sounding albums in my collection. So if you treasure great fidelity and great audiophile type things, and good music, this is amazing. I mean, for the opening track alone, her version of Steely Dan's Showbiz Kids is just an unbelievable track, and I love this record. She also does, Low Spark of High Heel Boys, the Traffic cut, which is an amazing cut. Anyway, it's a really nice album, and her voice is amazing. It's a very jazzy pop album, but I don't think I've shown this in the vinyl community. Love this record. Again, it's good to show off your stereo, but it's a good music, so it's not just one of those, things that doesn't. I may have showed this, but I don't remember. The first Split Enz album, Australia and New Zealand. I know you're not the same. I'm blanking. I think they're from New Zealand, and this is with a couple of the Finn brothers that later went on. One of the brothers, the brother of a brother, and everything, went on to start Crowded House. When I was managing a record store, and this came out in 76 or 7, and we had 1976, so it came out late 76, early 77. We had an in-store with them. They played the Boarding House in San Francisco, so we all got tickets and went. They would dress up in these costumes, and they came into the store, and I got it signed by them. So this is my signed copy by every member of Split Enz on Chrysalis Records. Really cool, kind of poppy, I don't want to say edgy prog. It's not really prog. Looking back on it, it seemed like it was prog at the time, but very high concept. I don't even know. It's not glam. I don't even know how to describe it. You listen to them. Split Enz. They got a little more commercial with their later albums. I believe, was it on A&M? I think maybe they were on Chrysalis, but their later albums are more accessible. This is a little out there, but actually playing it now, it's not so out there. But really cool record, Split Enz. One of the grandfathers or grandfather of rap and hip hop, and this is this was an amazing track that everyone I know got into when it came out. The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, Gil Scott-Heron. I don't think I've shown this on the VC. This is a 90s, late 90s comp. I think this might be a later vinyl reissue. Again, this is one record I had back in the day, and for some reason I didn't anymore, so I picked this up. But This is a brilliant album. Anybody who who likes hip hop, modern music, go to the roots and go to get this album, Gil Scott-Heron. And lastly, two records by a band that I've never shown on the VC, and that's the Fibonaccis. And the Fibonaccis were an LA band that a lot of people thought they were this Italian band because they had this sort of aura. Their music is not easy to explain. They're part of the post-punk thing, but they weren't in that at all. They're more of the art punk scene that was going on in the early 80s at Los Angeles, New York. Even San Francisco had this, like Wall of Voodoo and Oingo Boingo and that whole thing. Their take on it was almost like a Italian soundtrack. Their stuff's very much like Morricone's music, who, if you know Morricone, did most of the spaghetti western, Good, Bad, and the Ugly. The last thing before he died, he worked on the Tarantino film when they're held up in that cabin. I'm blanking out on the name of that film, but very Italian. They did some soundtrack work at some independent films in the 80s and early 90s. One's an EP. I forgot which one's which. One's an EP, one's an album, and they're really brilliant records and really kind of fun stuff and non-describable exactly, but not an Italian band, but a faux Italian band, the Fibonaccis from Los Angeles.
They rose. From dry guitars and two guitars, they flitted through the palace walls. They flung monotony behind, turned from their wont and nonchalant, they crowded the nocturnal halls. The lacquered loges huddled there, mumbled zeze and zeze and zeze. The moonlight fogged the girandoles. Cold dresses that they wore and the vapid haze of the window bays were tranquil as they leaned and looked from the windowsills at the alphabets.
This next question may be the last question, is the hardest question I've ever tried to answer. I'm going to make it up as I go along. I sort of make all the stuff as I go along of any of these contests that happen on the vinyl community. An artist you love, but you have none in their collection. Well, come on, Brad, really? If I love them, I'm gonna have them in my collection. I might not have them on vinyl, but I have them on compact discs. So, there are, forget it. I'm not gonna answer it. I refuse to answer it because if I want music, I'm gonna grab it. Now, maybe there are definitely artists that I don't have, there's certain titles that I don't have that I'd like to pick up. fill in my collections, which I showed features on Miles Davis, and I picked up a couple since that feature. And when I do the feature videos, I realize the things I'm missing. But then there's the thing, are you missing them that you need them, or you just want to fill in, be a completist? I'm trying not to do that anymore. I do it on certain artists, like with Van Morrison and that feature. So I don't have the answer for that. I mean, every once in a while there's something that I realize I don't have on vinyl that I want to get that I have on compact disc. Do I need it on both? Maybe. That's the answer. Again, I'm trying to like scale back, if you can believe that. So I don't have an answer for you. If that throws me out of the mix. In fact, I don't want to be in the mix. Brad, I'm going to say this now because, seriously, donate. If I get pulled, randomly pulled, donate my winnings to science. Science. There's a problem in America with science from the top down. So somehow make my donation of the $30, $35, whatever it is, to science. Your pick, science. Something that has to do with science. Mainly because I just won 2 contests in a row, and I don't want it to feel like it's been rigged here. I won Kempen's contest and Elliot Cruz contest. First prize, random drawings. So donate any potential winnings that Mazzy may get to science. Science trumps it all, literally. Mazzy loves you, and good luck, Brad, and I love your easy. In fact, we need you in the White House, Brad. Why don't you run for president? We need someone with your calmness and how articulate you are to run America, because it ain't happening the way it's happening. Sorry. Mazzy loves you. Take care.